Since summer 2011, a brownish pungent seaweed known as sargassum has been washing ashore on numerous Caribbean beaches and bays. Countries including Anguilla, Antigua and Barbuda, Barbados, British Virgin Islands, Guadeloupe, Martinique, St. Lucia, St. Martin and St. Martin were enveloped with floating mats of brown seaweed. Over the years, the influx of this seaweed impacting coastal areas within the Virgin Islands has significantly increased, causing residents to become concerned. On this GIS report, we'll hear from the experts: marine biologist Ms. Argel Horton, Environmental Health Officer Mr. Cameron Bennett, and Deputy Chief Agricultural Officer Mrs. Aruna Foy Fobbs, who will discuss the seaweed's impact on the territory, human life, marine life, as well as its environmental and agricultural benefits.
Sargassum seaweed is a brown algae that is found throughout our North Atlantic waters. There are two species of Sargassum seaweed. There's the Sargassum fluitans and there's the Sargassum nathans. You can distinguish the two by its leaves and its berry-like structure. The Sargassum nathans, their leaves are short in stalk and their berries are round in shape, but they are spiky at the end. And the Sargassum fluitans, their leaves they're elongated in shape, but their berries are perfectly round. These berries are what helps them keep them afloat. Because of these particular adaptations, they have no root structure, so they're always free floating, and they use the tides and currents to move them from one region to the next.
The sargassum seaweed was first found in the Sargasso Sea in the Atlantic Ocean around Barbuda, where it is said to have about 10 million tons. However, it is believed that the recent influxes are related to a massive sargassum blooms occurring in other areas of the Atlantic, not directly associated with the Sargasso Sea.
Originally, the sargassum that comes into the Virgin Islands originates from the Sargasso Sea. This is off the coast of Florida, close to Barbuda, where there's a large mat of Sargassum seaweed that's interlocked with one another. So the prevailing winds as well as the ocean currents keep that Sargassum seaweed in a tight-knit connectivity. Once there's rough waters within that region, the Sargassum seaweed breaks off from the large mat and travels along the Caribbean with the various currents and tide, and is found coming on shore, being washed upon the shore on our various beaches. In small quantities, the Sargassum seaweed does not hold any harm. It's actually a benefit. As the seaweed goes onto the shore, it eventually decomposes and incorporates itself into our sand, being nutrients for our vegetation as well as creation of sand dunes. However, with the new recent influx of Sargassum seaweed, we're using scientific data and backlogging the ocean currents. We're finding that the new influx is coming from off the coast of Brazil. In that region, we found that there's a lot of nutrient runoff from the various rivers, such as the Amazon River. There's high sea surface temperatures. There's constant upwelling, plus there's nutrients that's coming off of the Sahara Desert. All these make it a perfect example for the sargassum within that area to grow and multiply. Remember, they grow asexually, which means that they don't need gametes in order to reproduce. You can break off one section of the Sargassum seaweed, and once it meets the perfect conditions, they're able to fragmentate and multiply. With the currents within that region, the Sargassum seaweed will then travel up onto the Caribbean Sea, and that's when we're actually seeing these large influxes of Sargassum seaweed.
The sargassum seaweed has several environmental benefits, even acting as a nursery for marine life, and provides shelter and food for endangered species such as sea turtles.
Once out in the open ocean, the Sargassum seaweed provides numerous benefits for juvenile fish as it camouflages themselves inside of the seaweed, hiding themselves from various predators. However, it also attracts large pelagic fish, such as the mahi-mahi and tuna that are very important to our commercial fisheries. Migrating sea turtles, birds, insects, and other invertebrates also use the Sargassum seaweed as their feeding ground. Once the Sargassum seaweed starts to come closer onto the shore in large quantities, this is a devastating effect that we're now seeing in our Virgin Islands waters. When the Sargassum seaweed becomes too thick, it starts to decompose and it starts to break down, sinking also at the bottom of the substrate. Due to that, as well as the thick, large mats that's at the surface of the water, this is preventing the sunlight from being able to penetrate into the water column to create that photosynthesis cycle.
A few weeks ago, photos of dead fishes and other marine life trapped in the Sargassum seaweed went viral, causing fishermen and residents to become concerned.
So excess nutrients, such as phosphates and nitrates, penetrate into the water column. Bacteria, which is being produced by the decomposing Sargassum seaweed, is being created into the water and is using up the various dissolved oxygen that they'll be able to multiply and use up the dissolved oxygen at a quicker amount. This is creating a harsh environment for the marine life that's in there, making the environment into an aerobic environment, into an anaerobic environment, which means that the environment no longer can sustain or hold the marine life that's there, thus creating that negative impact where the marine life eventually dies off.
Residents in the territory are also concerned with the foul scent and the impact that the Sargassum seaweed has on human life.
When Sargassum seaweed starts decomposing, it releases a colorless gas, which is called the hydrogen sulfide. This gas smells somewhat like rotten eggs, and that is it's an unpleasant smell that's found throughout our various beaches.
The Sargassum seaweed does not have any immediate health effects on human life. However, the decomposition of the Sargassum seaweed is what produces hydrogen sulfide, which in certain concentrations can be toxic. Background concentrations of hydrogen sulfide are typically 1/1000th of a part per million to 3/1000th of a part per million. Those are the typical background concentrations, and any given day, that's what we're exposed to. However, in order to detect an odor, we would need 1/10th of a part per million to 1.5 parts per million in order to detect an odor. When we start seeing health effects of concentration of hydrogen sulfide is when we reach concentrations of 2 to 5 parts per million. Those concentrations are not necessarily achieved under normal circumstances out in the open because we have ventilation and the wind can take it away. However, certain persons who may have respiratory illnesses such as asthma, bronchitis, chronic obstructive pulmonary diseases such as emphysema may be a lot more sensitive. And under such circumstances, we would want to have these people minimize their exposure to hydrogen sulfide. Hydrogen sulfide gas under concentrations above 2 parts per million will cause nausea, vomiting, headache, etc., and watery eyes, itchy eyes, and so on. If that occurs, which it is unlikely, we would want to take persons to a ventilated area. So under these conditions, we would not necessarily see immediate health risks in the open, especially like at the seaside and so on. However, these effects are more apparent under enclosed areas, such as in closed spaces, rooms, sewers, and so on. And under current circumstances, such effects are unlikely.
The Sargassum seaweed is mostly found at the territory's beaches and bays, and the Environmental Health Department has confirmed that it does not pose any detrimental health effects.
Sargassum seaweed does not pose any immediate health effects if one were to swim in it. However, prolonged exposure may cause, especially in persons with skin sensitivities, may cause itching, scratching, and stickiness on the skin.
The Conservation and Fisheries Department is encouraging residents to periodically clean up the seaweed. The Department of Environmental Health is advising that volunteers wear protective gears during the cleanup.
During the cleanup, like any other form of solid waste matter, we would like to see individuals wear protective clothing, gloves, long sleeves, long pants, closed-toed shoes, and for those who may be sensitive to the odor that's being produced, you could wear face masks to prevent inhalation or to reduce inhalation of the hydrogen sulfide.
There are also several agricultural benefits and usages of the Sargassum seaweed.
There are several agricultural benefits to using the Sargassum seaweed. The seaweed actually is used as a soil amendment to the soil. Here in the BVI, the level of soil, the topsoil level is very shallow, and this seaweed can be utilized to serve as a mulch because it has a lot of holding capacity. So the water would be retained in this seaweed for a longer period of time. The seaweed also has nitrogen. There's a high level of nitrogen when you compare it to the animal manure, and it has a high level of potassium. It has a lower level of phosphorus. So what we would do in the Department of Agriculture is ensure that we can use it as an amendment to the soil. It also serves as a fertilizer to increase the root growth and its development. It promotes early fruiting and fruit set in vegetables and fruits. It also serves as a medium whereby cuttings can be rooted very quickly. And it also, because of the holding moisture capacity, it will allow for proper aeration in the soil, and it will also promote soil organisms like your worms to proliferate, which is required in order for all soils in the BVI to grow good plants. And also, the medium could be utilized as a fertilizer. Because it is utilized as a fertilizer, the plants are more healthier, so they can withstand longer drought, as we are experiencing the dry weather right now. Because of the holding capacity, the plants will retain the water longer, and also because it is more healthier, the plants are going to resist diseases and pests greater.
The Department of Agriculture are currently using 2 processes to convert the Sargassum seaweed into a biofertilizer, and is also conducting research on other ways to use the seaweed.
Okay, in the Department of Agriculture, we have commenced utilizing the Sargassum seaweed. So far, we have utilized 2 approaches. We have utilized first by drying the seaweed, removing some of the salt with water, where we lay it out on a flat area, and we allow water to flow through it, or either the rain. Then we let it dry, and after it has dried, we utilize a sifter, whereby we move it to a smaller level, and that smaller portion, all the branches and stuff that is left, is thrown away, and the smaller particles is what we utilize to put into the soil to add value to the soil. We also utilize another way to come about that end product in a shorter way, where we use a weed whacker. And that, utilizing that means you have to have it in an enclosed area, because the weed whacker will dispose these seaweed all over the place. So you have to have it in an enclosed area. However, the process to bring it down to a smaller level is much, much quicker. There's another option that we are going to use where we will utilize it with a mulch, where we will just leave it there in an open area and allow the rain and the elements to further degrade it. And over a period of time, maybe 6 months or less, we will go back, and then that process will break down all of the top layer way down to the bottom of the pile, and that product there will be utilized as a compost for us to utilize in the crop production. Research has also shown where the Sargassum seaweed, can also be utilized as an animal food. So we are going to also be conducting researches to see whereby we can best utilize it. However, the Sargassum seaweed in that particular area would have to be utilized while it is wet, not in the dry form, but while it is fresh and wet. That's how we will utilize it for the animal food. Well, I would recommend that it's a cheap way of getting fertilizer. This fertilizer would be in a natural form, and I will recommend the farming community to go out. There is a cleanup day coming, to go out and take opportunity of this activity. And besides just those cleaning up days, they go out and collect as much seaweed as they can. If there's sufficient space on their farm plots, they can just rest it in an area, or they can utilize one of the methods that we have recommended before, and following that, add it to their soil. The benefits are tremendous, because your fruit or the yield of your crop is higher when you utilize this. If you are now lacking water on your farm plots, this can be utilized as a holding capacity to retain water around the roots of your plant for a longer time. It also serves as a mulch, so it is also going to reduce the weeding, the time that you have to weed in your garden. So I would, as much as possible, encourage the farming community to go out and utilize this free and natural product to enhance their garden in the backyards and on their farm plots.
Entrepreneurs are encouraged to take advantage of this economic activity, preparing and selling the seaweed as a mulch or a biofertilizer.
It is one of our initiatives, yes, but we would also want the farming community to also utilize. It could be an entrepreneur could come up with that idea even within the farming community. And there's research also show that you can utilize it as a liquid fertilizer. And I would encourage the general public, whoever wants to take it on, can take it on. Yes, the Department of Agriculture has labor, and that would be an initiative, but it would not be something that we will be solely doing in the Department of Agriculture. There are other programs and initiatives that we have to take on. Thank you.
On this GIS report, we've heard from the experts, marine biologist Ms. Argel Horton, Environmental Health Officer Mr. Cameron Bennett, and Deputy Chief Agricultural Officer Mrs. Arona Foy-Fobbs, who spoke about the seaweed's impact on the territory, human life, marine life, as well as in environmental and agricultural benefits. The Conservation and Fisheries Department is encouraging residents to keep the BVI clean and periodically clean up the seaweed. Interested persons and organizations are asked to contact the Department of Conservation and Fisheries at 468-2700. For more information about the sargassum seaweed, visit the government's website at bvi.gov.vg or follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube at BVI Government.